All right, the hour of 6:30 having arrived, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Columbus Plan Commission to order for Thursday, February 12th, 2026. Mike, will you call the roll?
Hanfenson.
Here.
Pajewski.
Here.
Stapleman.
Here.
Monday.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Albright. Finkler.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. All right, this is to inform the public that this meeting was posted appropriately in accordance with state law. We have an agenda in front of us. I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Next on the agenda, I see swearing in of new plan commissioners.
With all of our committees, new committee members is swearing them in, and for the rest of you, when the term starts again in May, you'll get sworn in. The rest of you will get sworn in. So our city clerk Susan Kane is here.
So I need Nathan Anderson and Jason Stapleman to please step forward. Do you want to do it individually or together?
Oh, together is fine.
Okay. Since there's no family members present.
Nope.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Jason Stapleman,
Having been appointed to the City of Columbus Plan Commission,
having been appointed to the City of Columbus Plan Commission,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but
but have not yet
entered into the duties thereof,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the ordinances of the City of Columbus,
and the ordinances of the City of Columbus,
and will faithfully discharge
and will faithfully discharge
the duties of said appointment
the duties of said appointment
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
Help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I need you to sign. Nate? Just need you to sign. Yes, it means something. And you'll get to keep a copy.
All right.
Sign this one too, please. Nope, that's Nate's. And then Jason? Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Smooth on the statement.
All right, welcome and thanks. All right, next on the agenda, we have the approval of the minutes from December's meeting. So take a moment, review, and I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend. I don't know, that's what this says, 12/25.
We didn't meet in January.
Oh, okay.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Moving on to the next item, consider and take action regarding draft of Part 1 of the zoning code rewrite. So,
Yep.
welcome back.
And you have the PowerPoints available?
Yep, I can just click it right here.
Do I need to press a button?
Yes, the little speaker.
Face.
Yeah,
Thank
there
you.
we go.
Okay. Thanks for having me
Yep.
back. Sonia Kriesel with Vandewall and Associates. For the Plan Commission members that are new, we are working on a complete overhaul of the city zoning code, and the scope also includes rewriting of the subdivision code. That's not something that we've talked about yet, but this is a very big project. There is a lot of information, as you can tell by the first part, that's included in your packet tonight. Number of pages, just getting through the first half of the zoning code here. And a lot of policy questions and big decisions to make. So we're really just getting into the meat of things. A lot has been done so far in terms of community audit of the code, what are our big picture goals and priorities, and then we spent a little bit of time together reviewing what I would say is the framework for what you have tonight. So that was at the November meeting where we had all of those detailed tables, and we looked at generally how land uses are going to be structured in the code, bulk dimensions, which are things like setbacks and building height, zoning districts, how we are going to approach completely changing the zoning districts that are in the city of Columbus today and proposing the new framework that's in your part 1 packets tonight. So all the information that we're looking at tonight is building off of those things. Therefore, a lot of it has actually been looked at before, but it is a process where everything keeps coming together little by little. So in terms of project schedule, if you want to go to slide 2, just a reminder of where we're at, kind of drafting of part 1 in your packets tonight. We divide the code up into 2 parts so that it's a little bit more manageable. And I think even as we go into part 2, that's going to be broken further down. So I think tonight will be the biggest volume of information at one time, and eventually moving towards adoption later this year. Kind of cover this a little bit, but today we're really just focused on part 1. I'll explain what is in that, and then breaking the content down for future meetings. You can go ahead. Code organization. So if you're a developer or a property owner coming into Columbus wanting to do a project or looking at your property rights, you might start in a certain order of figuring out how you want to address your development on a parcel. And the zoning code framework here sort of follows that same order and outline. So you might look for the establishment of the zoning district. What is my property zoned? Then what are the land uses that I can establish there? Are they permitted or conditional? Okay, now I know what type of land use might be allowed there. I want to build a grocery store. What are my setbacks? What is the lot coverage that I need to follow? And then it gets more and more detailed as you go down. Eventually you'll figure out what are the exterior building design standards? How much landscaping do I have to have? And then procedurally in Article 10, how do I get that approved? Do I have to go to staff? Do I have to come to the Plan Commission? So that's the purpose of the way that the code is organized. Part 1 is the piece outlined there that we're looking at tonight. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes touching on the first 5 chapters here with a little slide for each saying what's in them. And then we'll dive into some content discussion. So Article 1 is what you see at the beginning of every zoning ordinance, establishes the legal framework, rules of interpretation, how to kind of look at the purpose and intent, all of that legalese. So that's really what is in Part 1. Article 1, sorry. Article 2 establishes the zoning districts. So on the screen here is a screenshot on the far right side of the page listing the zoning districts that we're starting with right now. There are 2 single-family zoning districts, 2 multifamily, and the mobile home districts. So those are your residential districts. The middle section of that table are the non-residential zoning districts, so mixed use and commercial, industrial, and other. And then there's a number of overlay zoning districts. One of the policy things that we'll be discussing tonight is whether we still like this mix of zoning districts. And we can keep things for now. We can go to the end of the whole project and still remove one, but this is what we have now. And then I wanted to point out the other screenshot that's in the middle of the page has like number 1, and then it says SR1, and then subsection A is the intent. In most zoning districts, that would actually be many more pages after that subsection A. Next, you would usually see a list of permitted uses, conditional, accessory, temporary, and then bulk standards for residential, bulk standards for non-residential. What we've done to make this a little bit more consumable is move all of that information into tables. So Article 3 is the land use table, and you use it like a chart, just like this, yep, and you find the zoning district on top and the land use on the left, and find whether it's a P or a C. Same with the bulk table in Article 4. This has the effect of, that whole zoning district section being some 2 pages instead of 50. Now, most people are going to be looking at this online, so that might not make a huge difference, but it also makes the code a little bit more, have a little bit more longevity if you need to start making amendments. If you need to change a bulk dimension in 5 years, you don't like how this zoning district is functioning, or you want to change a land use, you just have to change it in that one place instead of go back through all those pages. And I think that's really helpful to reduce errors and conflict over time. So that's why I like that approach.
One thing I'll just point out to the Plan Commission, on the right-hand side of the screen there's a graphic. And if you look at our current code, you will not see one single graphic or illustration. And so that's one of the things we're trying to add more of, because sometimes a picture is a lot more understandable than
Right.
text.
Right. Good. Yeah, and in Article 3, just on that page before that, is another example showing an individual land use diagram. So for every residential land use, for example, it shows you what that housing type might look like and then where to take the setbacks from. Good. And then Article 5 is pretty standard information on how to deal with non-conforming situations. And there's not a lot in here that's different from typical zoning codes. We deal with non-conforming land uses, non-conforming, so those are the one, like, it's not allowed in the zoning district today, but it was established prior to the zoning code being adopted. A non-conforming parcel, so maybe it's too small, it's 3,000 square feet and it's supposed to be 8, and non-conforming structures, so things that don't meet setbacks and such. So that is a fairly standard approach there in Article 5. So now I'm going to start introducing the policy questions, and I just want to start by saying maybe 144 pages, if I remember what Part 1 included. And we've boiled this down to just 10 questions to get the Plan Commission's feedback on. I think we could be here for days if we wanted to take every line item, so I'm trying to be efficient, but I also don't want to exclude any other important information that you caught and read through. So feel free to ask questions. We can jot them down if we're running out of time or whatever and follow up. But these are working through with Mike and David policy questions that we identified together. And then the only other thing by way of intro is that there's this supporting memo. So that follows all 10 of these policy questions. And then it asks you a question. Do you want to keep this approach, modify it, or remove it? That's just an exercise to help us get to a consensus and to be able to move off of tonight's meeting, but it's by no means supposed to force you into an answer or mean that it's set in stone. And I'm not looking for formal votes or anything like that. So we can take these at a pace that we want to. So starting off, residential zoning district mix. Like I mentioned, we have 2 single-family zoning districts, SR1 and SR2. They are both smaller than your existing minimum lot size requirements for single family. The SR1 has 8,000 square feet. So that's a little bit smaller than a traditional zoning code of the past 40, 50 years. We would usually see a 10,000 square foot lot size as a pretty standard approach. 8,000 is not that much smaller than that, but provides a little bit more flexibility and is definitely the trend where best practice recommendations are going in a lot of peer communities. The SR2 zoning district has a 5,000 square foot lot size. That's getting a little bit smaller, allowing for a more compact and efficient land use pattern, but it still doesn't require that you use alley loaded development, for example. It allows for front load, much like what you see in the images here. The front porches might come a little bit closer to the sidewalk. It's not too dissimilar from a very traditional, early 1900s zoning pattern. So Those are the two single-family districts that we have, and then we also have two multifamily districts. I'll just pause and see if there are any questions, if you want to take these one by one. In November, we talked about whether we had to have another single-family district with a lot size of like 12,000 square feet. And the conversation around that was maybe we need that to protect the character of neighborhoods that have larger lots so that we don't have a bunch of subdivisions. Talking through that and reviewing the map, we didn't think that there was a huge risk there because if you took the SR1 with 8,000 square feet, you'd have to have a lot of lots that are double that in order to subdivide. And with a 60-foot lot width, you'd have to have 120 feet of frontage. So there aren't a lot of lots that would meet both of those 120 feet of frontage plus 16,000 square feet in size to be able to chop them in half and dramatically change the nature of a neighborhood. You can always have a larger lot size than the 8,000 square feet too. It's just a minimum.
Are you looking for us to, like, talk through our opinions when we circle it, or to just fill this out and then turn it back in?
However you want to do it, we can just clip through these and I can look for head nods and things like that, or if you want to jump in with comments. I think my goal is to walk away with you saying, yeah, we're comfortable with this. If we want to go in a different direction as we think more, we can, but
Yeah,
walk through each one.
I'm going to suggest that if we have questions, obviously this is the time, but if we just want to
Yeah.
sort of enter something into the record, let's use this.
What is the average lot size now, like, in the new subdivision by the apartments where the old farm was? I'm just trying to get a,
Those are they're variable, partly because there's kind of two cul-de-sacs. There's weird size. I can bring those up quick, but they're for sure, I think, around the 5 to 7. Some of those are 5 to 7,000 on the small side, and I think 7,000 on the larger side.
okay.
Yeah, that's,
And the frontage, I think, was 55 or 60 feet.
yeah, 55 or 60.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just
and
trying to
with-
gauge how big
Yeah,
this
like get a
is.
sense of
I
scale.
think there's a couple 70-footers in there, on the east, where the lot, there's a few wider lots. So there's really quite a variety on
Yeah.
that street.
And it's always awkward, kind of on the corner, like where the road turns as you
Yeah.
climb the hill.
Yeah, because it's
You know,
really
that-
wide,
that-
it's
that one
pie-shaped.
sort of
Yep,
takes up that corner, so you
Yeah.
always end up with a weirdly big lot. But
Maybe that was a bad
typically-
example, but on
Yeah.
average, like like over by Molly's house or my house in the Meadow Lane area or Highview, are those about a 6,000-7,000 square foot lot?
I'm gonna,
Mine's a third of an,
I was gonna say you're
Acre-
probably close to 10.
yeah, so what's a
Okay.
third of an acre maybe? That might help. Or quarter acre, how many thousand of feet is that?
Little over 10,
Let's see.
Such a,
between 10 and
A
12.
quarter acre is about 11,000 square feet, a little under.
Okay.
so like these, here we go, up on the screen. I'm not sure how accurate these .16 I can, let me,
For subdivision lots, that's really accurate. So.
So that's just under 7,000 square feet.
yeah, I'm gonna, and then like this one right here. 8,430.
Yeah, and then these are a good example here, the ones that go real deep and run up the hill, right? Those are probably
10.
11,000,
Yep.
12,000
All right.
each.
Almost
But
11,000.
That's a good example of one that couldn't get divided even if it had 16,000.
Right.
Frontage isn't.
And we found the same for those really big lots on the end of a cul-de-sac because they don't have the frontage, they go
Yeah.
out so big this way, yeah.
Yeah, we checked a whole bunch of the newer subdivisions, neighborhoods, and, you know, there is one really big house out there. That's, I think, a couple lots, maybe 3, but that's a real, there's no other examples like that out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll go on to number 2. Stop me if you'd like. But this one talks about the mix of commercial zoning districts, so business and industrial. And we have 3 in there still, the business park, BP, light industrial, and heavy industrial. I believe today you have a light and a heavy, and then you use a variety of overlay districts, and one of those is the Gateway Overlay District, which establishes some higher design standards for certain areas. We're trying to not overuse overlay districts, and so part of the idea is that the business park would provide a little bit of differentiation from industrial land uses. So like Mike, for example, when he was reviewing this part of the code, he looked at the table in Article 3 and looked at these 3 zoning districts across the top, and he said, a lot of the Ps and Cs are really similar. Are these districts different enough? Like, why do we need all of those? And so I double checked, made sure that the mix of those was working correctly. Heavy industrial is going to take heavier nuisance land uses. You don't actually have any of this mapped anywhere in the city right now. Potential for noise, odor. There might be more outdoor storage associated with heavy industrial. Light industrial, on the other hand, is going to be primarily characterized by indoor land uses. Loading docks are maybe screened, but that's the only sort of outdoor activity that's happening. There's no outdoor storage. So that's your lighter manufacturing and things that are going to be housed indoors. Business park might be a little bit more flexible to allow commercial land uses, but the primary reason why we see a lot of communities doing business park is so that they can have that higher design standard. So not encumbering the industrial land uses, but if there's a certain area that they want to have that more kind of commercial look, or, you know, Whitewater has a tech district. Fitchburg's was called commercial industrial, and it was meant for that more sort of high-tech innovation and office park development. I think as we go through this, it's entirely possible we could get rid of BP, and you could just make your standards for light industrial higher. But that's the trade-off. Do you want to have that type of development basically be more expensive? Or do you want to distinguish? So that's what we're dealing with here.
Is it fair to say the bulk regulations and the allowable uses in each one are very similar, but where the differentiation will come will be in the design standards and the, whatever it is,
Those
the
land use
Article 7,
characteristics.
the building design standards and the performance standards? Is that
Yeah,
fair
they're
to
really
say?
similar, especially between the BP and the LI.
Yeah.
The bulk standards, the heavy industrial does have a 1 acre minimum.
Okay.
So that's a pretty different district.
And kind of the reason for this discussion on business park is in the comprehensive plan, that whole 151 Park Avenue interchange area, the future land use there is called business park, and that area is kind of known as Gateway, and there's some design standards for Interpac that were in place. But it's a gateway to the community, major entry. So I guess from a big picture vision for the city is kind of how do you take that comprehensive plan and implement it on the ground? The comprehensive plan talks about quality development. Well, that's pretty vague. So this is how we implement it, and your decision and guidance on this is do we go with some kind of design criteria for materials and roof lines and whatever, or do we not have those? And design criteria can be a whole bunch of stuff or just a few things and everything in between. So that's kind of things we want you to be thinking about as we go through this.
All right.
Next one.
Number 3 is another sort of zoning district focus, and this is on the downtown. The policy issue that we've pulled out here is specific to residential. So your existing zoning district downtown, I think, is called CB, Central Business. And in this version, it's DMU, Downtown Mixed Use. We want to, for the most part, encourage and allow mixed uses throughout zoning districts as appropriate. That's based on some of the feedback that we've heard and just making development a little bit easier to do, kind of matching with more modern development trends. But in the downtown, for example, we might want to be more protective about basically the main streets. So while the DMU district would cover the same area, most likely, that CB does today, so it's a couple of blocks long, and it comes all the way down to this site. I think this site is Zone CB. This whole street is Zone CB. Might a 100% residential building be appropriate here if, some of these lots were to redevelop? But on Ludington or East James, ground floor residential might be not appropriate. I would argue that it's not. So to preserve the commercial and the Main Street type commercial district, we have a line item in here that says no ground floor residential at all on parcels that face Ludington or East James. But if you're in the DMU and you are not a parcel that fronts on those two streets, you can have ground floor residential. There are ways to modify this, if you wanted to think about the options that I'm presenting, keep, remove, or modify. Some communities might require ground floor commercial in the first 50 feet of frontage on Ludington, for example, and then you could have residential on the back side of the building. In talking with staff and myself, we thought it just protected the historic core a little bit more, not to open the door to residential in those areas. But some communities do take a more flexible approach that way.
So it's overlay without having an overlay map.
Kind of, yeah, it's like a little bit of a tweak
Yeah.
difference, I would, yeah.
I had another question. Is this a district that, I suppose it could be used in other areas of the city, but is that the vision that it ever really would be?
Would be guided by your comprehensive plan, and I would say probably not. You have a distinct enough historic downtown where you're gonna have a different zoning district for that. But other communities definitely have a central business approach where it's mapped in multiple locations.
Sure, okay. But arguably,
It's really customized, I would say,
Yeah.
for this.
okay, arguably somebody could rezone an area. I'm thinking of a couple of spots that within the next 20 or 30 years might get redeveloped, right? If they wanted to replicate that look, they could.
Yeah, so that would probably be something more like, so we have a corridor mixed use as the other primary commercial zoning district, CMU. And so that allows mixed land uses. It's not as heavily focused on preserving ground floor commercial.
Yeah, it doesn't
or
have that restriction on it.
setback. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm sure you guys have analyzed our zoning map extensively. One of the things we do have, we talked about overlays before. We have our downtown, our central business zoning district in the core downtown, and then extending on James Street and Ludington, there's an overlay, a mixed-use overlay that goes a decent amount of ways from the core downtown. And some of those are duplexes, some of those are fourplexes, and some of those are single-family. And so one of the things we had a discussion is, should that, which zoning, was it commercial mixed use? Should that include single-family homes or not? So that in some cases, that would like take away a mixed-use option that they currently have. So next time you turn on the zoning map, turn on the overlay layer and take a look at that.
So what's the status of the current buildings down there? I mean, do they fit within these requirements? Or 90% of them have to be grandfathered?
I think they would fit in, yeah.
Quite a few fit?
Oh, yeah.
Within what we're
Absolutely.
proposing? Okay.
Because this district would be drawn specifically to incorporate the buildings that fit this description and exclude the ones that don't.
Yeah.
As opposed to that overlay you're talking about where that's much more extensive and includes all sorts of stuff.
Yep, when we translate these into the map, which you'll receive at a future meeting, for the most part, we're gonna try to do it one-to-one, because we just don't wanna create a bunch of nonconformances like you were asking. And there will be new zoning districts, but those, we're still gonna try to match, the type of development reflected on the ground. Okay. The next one here is about group developments. This is a little bit of a in the weeds policy issue that maybe staff might have more comments on, particularly engineering and things like that. But it's something that I wanted to bring up because a lot of communities, if you have more than one principal building per lot, so think of a apartment complex, for example, and you have 2 or 3 different buildings, they're all 2 stories and maybe they have 12 units per building. And there are a few of those on one parcel that's owned by one individual. You would require a group development to allow more than one building. A lot of times that's to ensure that, you know, maybe in the future, the individual buildings could be subdivided off if someone wanted to sell one, that the setbacks and the area preserved around each of those buildings is sufficient. Or maybe to plan things like shared entrances or utility, allow for, you know, future divisibility and utility concerns. I know your engineer has looked at some issues like that. But in spirit of trying to make the code more flexible, this is the direction that we're going in a lot of places where you can have more than one building per lot as a by right use. The protection that you still get is that you have to still meet the setbacks. So from the exterior boundary of the lot, you'd still have to have like a 10-foot side yard setback and whatever else the dimensions are. You'd still have to have the same amount of parking that the land uses require. You'd still have to have the required amount of open space on the lot. So it's just the idea of going through one more step for a group development CUP. Just adds a lot more than maybe you get back from it.
And one of the things we want to continue, currently we require separate utilities for each principal building, so that if at some time in the future, people want to split those off, we don't have any utility issues. We currently have that requirement in our code, and we'll want to carry that through with this concept as well.
Okay. All right, the next one is regarding historic preservation. I'm curious if you have any feedback on this one. So it's definitely one that we've talked through with staff, but it is basically omitted from the code right now. So we're still figuring out what to do with this topic. As I understand it, you don't have a historic preservation overlay on the downtown right now. So you don't have like design standards. That's usually what we would see in a historic preservation overlay from a zoning district perspective. And that would say, for example, if you look at that bottom image, all of those buildings are 2 stories. If one is demolished, we don't want to replace it with a 1-story building and have like a missing tooth in the development pattern. So it tries to have some minimum standards there.
We do have a downtown sign overlay district,
Right, so again, an overlay.
which doesn't
Yeah.
allow sandwich board signs, which you want in downtown.
Yeah. So this is typically what I would be putting into a code is a historic preservation overlay. You know, we could also just work it into that DMU district that we talked about. But totally separate from zoning standards like that and design guidelines. You have in your zoning ordinance committee structure and how to deal with city landmark properties, which might be, for example, a single-family home in an SR1 zoning district, and say someone wants to change the color of the siding, a landmarks ordinance would come through and require a certificate of appropriateness. You would usually have that be reviewed by the Landmarks Commission, and it's more really about historic preservation than it is about zoning. And then you also have, you know, structure for the committee itself, who's on the Landmarks Commission, or the HLPC that you call it here, who may nominate a property to be a city landmark. So my feeling is that ideally that would be removed from the zoning code. I've seen a lot of, like, if this is chapter 19, I don't remember the numbers, then you would maybe have a chapter 18 for landmarks, and it would be separate.
Right. Last year, this is background for the Plan Commission, because I know Molly remembers, we did a lot of work on trying aligning committees so they were standardized with council representation, terms, kind of standardizing terms and other things. What Sonia's talking about is those types of things would be moved from 114 for historic preservation and moved with all those other committees. So that when this gets repealed and replaced, there'd be another creation of a new, or amending of that other section where all the other committee members and the description of the HLPC's powers and membership and all that kind of stuff. So that's, it's really trying to bring it in line with all the work that the council did last year.
Are we able to prevent some of the pain points that we have with those certificate of authenticity within the zoning code? I don't know if there's like certain things that we can allow or put in here that would avoid that whole process, because I know it's kind of like a pain point for some citizens, especially like downtown, like even like the sign process, we hear feedback that that's a pain point. I don't know if that's within scope of this, but if there's anything that we can make it easier for them to conform to historic preservation, but not go through months of reviews through HLPC, it might be nice. I don't know if it's possible, like I said, but just throwing it out there.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is this will be the policy, and HLPC kind of polices it?
No, they'd be separate.
They'd be separate.
This effort is aimed at getting more definition to it, right?
Defining a process, and right now, there's a couple different pieces here. There's the committee makeup and actual powers, and, you know, who has a final say on a landmark decision? Does HLPC have the final decision, or does council have the final decision? Then there's the whole certificate of appropriateness, and right now there's a process for HLPC to review those, but there's no standards. So a business that comes into downtown, is leasing a space, wants to get a sign up, there's no standards. There's no standards in the code for them to give them guidance. And then it leads to some potentially subjective decisions because there's no standards.
And that's what I would like to avoid
Right.
at all costs.
But it seems like whether it becomes integrated into this code and becomes the purview of the Plan Commission, or remains outside of this code and is the purview of some other committee, like, that's a different question than the standards problem is going to exist no matter which
Yeah.
way it goes, and that has to be resolved.
I feel like when we think about standards, if a historic building is being updated or maintained, you know, putting a color of paint on it that maybe someone doesn't like the color of paint, but paint is different than, say, boarding up windows or making window openings smaller, and doing things that structurally really change the character of it and are a lot harder to reverse. You know, the exception to my comment about paint might be if you're painting brick in a way that's not good for that brick, that's gonna cause it to trap moisture and fall apart in 10 years. You know, you wanna stop someone from wrecking history. But yeah, having it codified, yes, we expect that you're preserving historic materials, keeping finishes or materials, you know, period correct for that, for the age of that building. I mean, I can see some value to giving some clarity to what it is that you're asking someone to do.
Okay.
Does the, I'll just call it overlay, I realize that it encompasses individual properties at locations, I understand it encompasses entire blocks at other locations in the city. Is it mainly a design standard issue, not a bulk dimension issue, not necessarily a setback issue? Like, it's sort of focused on the character of the property, so it's more of a singular dimension than all of the things that this
I
code
believe so,
follows.
because your DMU zoning district that would apply to the downtown has, you know, minimum lot width 10 feet. It has a maximum front yard setback of 10 feet, so that helps set the basic.
Right. And a
building
historic property
envelope.
wouldn't have a different setback.
Yeah.
Or different height requirements, or any of those bulk things.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So it seems like it's like the size and space is really defined by this, whereas the character might possibly be defined by it's gonna be
Maybe
defined by
an
the
overlay.
historic stuff.
Materials, color,
Okay.
signage. Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out the issue, and I think this conversation is helpful. Let me just suggest a possible path. So if you're zoned DMU, we have those basic bulk dimensions, and then say we put in a historic preservation overlay on top with more objective standards for things like window size, treatment, when you can paint, storefront windows. So maybe that's appropriate. It sounds like you do want some standards. And then the next question would be, who has authority on those? So maybe one option would be, this is how the City of Monroe does it, is the landmarks group reviews and makes a recommendation, and the plan commission takes action. But you wouldn't see, there would be a difference between, like if you're a single-family home somewhere in the residential part of the community and it's an old mansion and it's zoned SF1 and they want to do something, maybe that would just go to landmarks and it wouldn't come to plan commission. I think that's how I've seen that.
I just want to avoid this going to council. I know we've done a lot of work to try to rely on our committees and commissions, so I don't want to add, I know, Mike, you had mentioned, you know, do we want the final word to be council or do we want a HLPC? I think that, like, I like it better, HLPC makes a recommendation to plan commission than I like council, but I wouldn't mind council being like a appeal, maybe, where somebody could appeal to council if they really want to do that. But that's just my initial thoughts.
Yeah, because right now, like to designate, anyone in the world currently can designate someone's property, nominate a property. So I could nominate my neighbor's property to be designated as historic, or someone outside the community could nominate an area to be a historic district. And then there's a process currently, public hearing, some of those things. And then HLPC takes a vote, and their decision is final. It doesn't go to any other committee, doesn't go to council. So their decision, now there is an appeals process after that, but that's the way it's set up currently for those types of things.
I would agree with Molly's, what she came up with. I like the idea, because if for some reason the historic group can't get people or becomes defunct, at least the plan commission is here to take on those tasks and then have the council as kind of an appeals process. I think that's a good check and balance and a good avenue to go.
And can it be a discussion right now, as we're developing this thing, right? Can it be a discussion with maybe somebody that owns one of these properties, HLPC, the city, just see how we can all align better, instead of the city coming up with a policy and then making everybody else conform to that.
I think that's where some of our future public input sessions come in.
Okay.
Where property owners and HLPC can come in and share their thoughts.
I'm sure you could find a friendly out there. I know there's not many.
You know, I did talk to a downtown property owner, the question about paint, and the whole idea, you know, the whole brick and moisture and all that kind of stuff. And this person's comment was, if it's the original brick and color without paint, it would be a really bad idea to paint over that. If it's already painted, it's a much, it's a bigger challenge to remove that and all those other things. And this person's view was that if it's already painted, you kind of gone down the
Well,
way.
at that point, the damage from having brick that should have been painted is probably done, and at that point, I guess, that's kind of that example's a moot point, but.
Yeah, yeah. So anyways, that was probably lines pretty much kind of what you're thinking, but I think those are all paint on original brick and all that kind of stuff. Those are all very relevant for downtown and maintaining the historic character.
Well, and I think when you consider some of these ordinances that might govern what can be done on a historic property, you have to remember that it might not always be an owner who wants to preserve his building. You might have a situation where someone wants to knock one down and put a parking lot there or something. And, you know, how will the codes and the zoning work then to protect someone from acquiring a property that maybe we wanted to see saved, and as someone who owns it has a different idea. So most of the time, I would say I would try to write codes with respect to the property owner's right to do what they want to with the property, but like the downtown historic district being a bit of an exception to that.
We have an example on North Dickinson, next to the old Searcy's building. There was a building that was very dilapidated. It was torn down, and then there was infill development with a very nice building put in. So that's an example where it probably made sense to tear that down and do something. And I think that's probably an example of redevelopment that needed to happen, and it ended up in a more positive situation. But certainly, the situation you're
Right,
talking
that
about
one
could
was a
happen
good,
too.
very good outcome. Yeah, that's an example of it. You're right, that's an example of it done right.
Yeah.
All right, I think I heard some things that are helpful to establish direction. I think the next best step is to actually put something in writing and then keep working. Okay. Data centers. So we've touched on this a little bit here and there. News every single day. there are over 50 or around 50 data centers in Wisconsin already, but the ones that everybody is concerned about right now are like the big 6 or 7 that are, Mount Pleasant, Port Washington, Beaver Dam, the one that was just pulled into Forest. The demand, the negotiations, it's not going away. You also, if there's not one proposed, you're hearing about, offers being made in Brown County, or there was one in Southwest Wisconsin the other day. So, communities are just not prepared to deal with the hyperscale. Most zoning codes don't deal with this issue at all. They're pretty silent, and that leaves you at risk for some interpretation. Jefferson proactively made their zoning code a little bit stricter. Madison has a moratorium. We just talked about this in Johnson Creek, and they might want to go with a more protective version. Someone even mentioned a moratorium there. But what this does is it at least defines it for you as, for those hyperscale ones, really something that would go into a special zoning district that would only be able to occur if the Plan Commission and the council approved a rezone to that zoning district. So how do we have it written? It's only in the IOA, intensive outdoor activity. So that's the zoning district that we're creating or proposing that would be sort of a catch district for those high nuisance land uses. It wouldn't be intended to be mapped anywhere. If anyone wanted to use that zoning district, they'd have to apply. You have full legislative discretion to deny a rezone. And on top of that, it would require a CUP. We know that dealing with CUPs is a little bit more difficult than it used to be before 2017 because basically the city has the burden of proof to deny it. But you could make it a data center a permitted use there, but using the CUP still gives you some ability to put conditions based on substantial evidence. Oh, there's not going to be enough, water or electrical capacity. Well, that's substantial evidence to put a condition on a conditional use. So that's how the hyperscale data center is defined and dealt with in the proposed code. But I also did make a carve out for minor data centers and define those as being less than 20,000 square feet in size and less than 5 megawatts of energy usage. And those would be treated as a light industrial land use permitted where light industrial land uses are allowed. That is an approach that some places like that are maybe open to data centers as they've been established in the state. Like I said, there are about 50 already that probably were addressed in a way like this in a zoning code. Jefferson, I think, was presented with this option, and they said, we want to take a step back and not allow that sort of carve out at all. So
Don't we have a data center right down the road?
I heard that at the last meeting.
Yeah, it's,
I mean, it's tiny.
yeah,
Across from the post office, right?
yeah. Well, next to library.
Next to the library.
And it's a old, yeah. It's more of a telephone-related IT.
I've got a few observations I'd like to share, if everybody will entertain me for a moment. I've been giving this a lot of thought. So it seems that the concern with data centers, like you use the word nuisance, but it's not nuisance in the sense of a lot of traffic or, I mean, I guess there can be some noises, there can be some heat generation, things like that. But it doesn't seem to be a nuisance in the classic sense of the word, in the zoning sense, right? It's a demand on resources. It's a demand on our utilities. It's a demand on infrastructure that a community probably doesn't have. So that's generally the category that this all falls under. So in a lot of ways, I actually don't believe that this is a zoning issue. I think zoning can be used or could be used as a proxy to sort of avoid that cataclysmic idea of the proposal of a data center in a community and have to grapple with those things. I'll be honest, I think the moratoriums and things like that you talk about in other communities are a way of just using zoning to avoid having to really deal with the infrastructure problem. Okay? Because like the zoning ordinances for, say, industrial or other categories will often include restrictions on light, heat emissions, noise emissions, all of those things. So any of those kind of nuisance problems arguably are already dealt with inside the zoning code. So I think it really, well, I was going to say there was one intersection with zoning. Well, the only thing where I think it really intersects with zoning and community planning is the concern that a lot of people have that this is a boom then bust proposition. And do we want to protect our community from the possibility that this is something that we'll suddenly see, all these unused data centers in 5 years, right? And then have a community be saddled with that. So I think that's where it most intersects with the zoning issue. So I don't know if I have an answer, but those are a lot of the things I've been thinking about. I think if we thought maybe we ought to try to use the zoning ordinance as that proxy for protecting against a high demand on our infrastructure, could we consider a maximum lot size for some of our districts, right? That would basically allow them, but limit how much is going to be there. Maybe you've already kind of done that in here. So anyway, thanks everybody.
I would say one thing I like about this proposed approach, if I understand it correctly, is it doesn't mean that one can never happen. It just means there's oversight. And so I think that's good because it gives city leaders the opportunity to review what's put forth, listen to constituents, and decide if it's something that groups want to allow or not. But I do think in a way it's a quality of life issue to guard against what could happen on a really big scale. We don't have a lot of land left in the city of Columbus to develop. And, if you took, I don't know how many acres these take, if you take 80 or 100 acres or whatever it might be, and it gets sold to a large data center, does that mean that the school district is now competing with Amazon to buy land for their next school? Is it land that a developer could have put housing on to support other businesses growing in the community versus a data center which may have no real benefits to the residents here? Yeah, it has the drain on some of our infrastructure and doesn't create jobs or very few jobs. So I think I like the proposed approach. I think it gives us control without shutting the door.
Well put. So being that we don't have a lot of land, how can we position ourselves to protect ourselves against, I would assume, if we were asked to annex part of the township into the city of Columbus because somebody had sold their property for this? Is there a way to protect our borders that you can't just put it all in place and then give it to the city?
Yep, so that's what you were kind of summarizing well, which is this just gives you the tools to protect yourself, because there could be a landowner petition to annex, and you could accept that petition or not. But you could also, in terms of the zoning, say we're going to deny the rezone for, any reason that's just not an arbitrary reason. You have full legislative discretion to deny a rezone. So that gives you a lot of protection to either deny it or if the community decides this is the right scale, or it's supporting some other economic development goals, or it's the tax base that we need, or it's an area that we're not reserving for some other land use, or it's not quite hyperscale, we're comfortable with this, you have the ability to consider that. There's also a definition for data center, which is on page 62. And that, to your point, it does start to blend the capacity issue in there, because one of the regulations to get a conditional use permit would be that you have to have utility plans and operational capacity regarding water, electricity, fiber, cooling systems shall be provided, reviewed by Director of Public Works to determine if there's sufficient capacity. So that's where that opens the door for you to be able to say, is there sufficient evidence to determine that that condition has been met or not?
And that not at the cost of taxpayers.
And that can be a decision, yeah.
So is this microphone?
Microphone. From a rural perspective, who controls all of that? Is that the county? Or is it the township? Or does the city have our surrounding townships that we can help define this as well? Or is this,
County zoning, and how does our extraterritorial zoning fit in?
Do you have ETZ?
No.
So you don't have ETZ, so you don't have land use control outside of your,
We have plating,
Borders, but you have plating.
extraterritorial plating.
Right, which we just had a couple of
Yes.
months ago with that
yeah.
land division out in
And
Elba
your,
Heights.
yeah,
Right,
your
okay.
discretion on those is pretty limited. Can you, I guess is the question, like, how likely is a data center to develop in the town jurisdiction rather than in the city? And for the most part, these things need city services, so that would be, that's just what happened in DeForest. QTS needed city services, or Village of DeForest, to be able to develop the data center, so they were going to annex 1,600 acres. It wasn't going to be developed in the town of Vienna.
And that was a good point about the services being available. How does that intersect with, like, I would imagine that other permitted land uses would still need to go to Public Works Committee or Development, what do you call that? The Friday Development Committee meetings.
Development review team?
Yeah, right? Like wouldn't a lot of these, data centers and other things would have to make those stops too, even if it's a permitted use on a particular
Yeah,
parcel?
if there's let's say, for instance, the Quick Trip that was redeveloped, they provided a site plan, and that is a staff reviewed to code standards. And so, the city engineer, myself, utility director, we all look it over, and there's a review, comprehensive review by staff, but they ultimately need to meet what's in the city code for site plan standards. So there's that review there, but, so if they're in a commercial zoning district, we apply all the setbacks and all that way, so. There is review. I think the big thing on the data centers here is there's multiple things going on here. This is also a planning function, what's in our comprehensive plan, where do we want to grow, which we don't necessarily have those in our current plan. If someone petitions to annex, the council can deny the annexation. And if we choose to add in, we can, I believe, they may request a certain rezone, and this would be a city attorney question, but I know in normal order, if someone came to you guys and recommended asked for a zoning district change, but you thought a different zoning district was appropriate, you could recommend a different zoning district. So there's a lot of different options there, and so this is a planning issue, it's annexation law, and then it's also the zoning code that come into play.
I'll agree with Steve on this. I think we have to have something on the books, minimums, whatever, some ditch banks for them. I know personal dealings with these things, in Port Washington especially, there was nothing on the books, so it became a huge mess. Beaver Dam became a huge mess because there were no processes on the books. I think at least we should have something mentioned about it to be prepared, you know, so there's something that, you know, we can refer back to, prevent, or set standards for them. At least be ready for it and not be caught with all of a sudden a proposal that, where does it go? What do we do? So I'd like to see something in there at least.
Up here on the slide, Sonia has in there minor data centers, less than 20,000 square feet, as a permitted in the light industrial district. So that's a smaller data center. So are you guys comfortable with that, or do you want to see all data centers handled the same?
I'm not as concerned about something when you're talking 20,000 square feet. That's, knowing the size of some buildings that I'm familiar with, that's not that big of a building. And you're still gonna have the ability to talk to utility people and so on about what's happening, but
Is there a workaround there? Like, could somebody propose 30 of these?
I made a note of that to check that language because we were just talking about group developments. And I don't want the situation to come up where you don't need a group, you know, it's permitted by right to have more than one principal structure as long as each principal structure is 20,000 square feet. So I'm gonna double check that.
I just quick wanna, been sitting here very patient. I just want to echo what Steve said, and Nate and Mike and others. I would like to keep the proposed approach that's in here. I don't care about the small data centers. I think that's fine in the light industrial. But I agree on checking on the, making sure we can't just put a boatload of ones in there. But I like having the approach in here at least.
Okay.
But the minor ones, I'm sorry. The minor ones would still have permits or requirements
Site plan
to make
review.
sure that the utilities, the infrastructure's there and all of that good stuff.
Yep.
Just a technical question, how detailed can you get in the city code? Like if one of these facilities comes in, leaves in 20 years, can you require that they're responsible to get the building down? Disposal, whatever?
Yeah, so some examples of like reclamation plans would be, in a county situation or a town quarries have reclamation plans, and that's built into land use regulations. More city, it's a little bit ag rural boundary, but solar often has a reclamation, maybe it's like for a 30-year contract, and when that's done, panels shall be removed, so I could look into some model practices for that.
And sometimes bonds are required to be held so that if someone abandoned, doesn't do their job, based on personal experience, professional experience, bonds are not a silver bullet. Bond companies can say, we don't want to pay, and sometimes bond companies go out of business. You end up in court for, say, 20 years in one particular community I'm thinking of. And then also, part of that also can be, and this is maybe more of a building code thing that we should think about, requiring bonds, or like requiring a demo permit for commercial industrial buildings and a bond with the city as the benefactor. I'm just basing off of previous professional experience. If you don't have that, you get a bad developer, and then they just have a partially torn down building and it sits there forever, and you have no tools to do anything. So some of this stuff is ordinance and development work outside the zoning code as well.
Okay. Feedback. Ready to go to the next one? Accessory dwelling units, ADUs. often referred to as granny flats, mother-in-law suites, but they're being understood in much broader terms in more recent past. This is one of the key things that all of the planning organizations and zoning best practices are saying, make your code more flexible for ADUs for a number of reasons, to address housing affordability, to address changes in the way that households are put together, family characteristics, things like that. These can also provide dwelling units for older adults that maybe need supportive care, or adults with developmental disabilities, or adult children that are back from college but want their own living space, or, the list goes on and on for the way that ADUs could be used and the benefits that they could bring in a housing just variety of housing types available in the community. So in your existing code, these are not permitted. No one would be able to establish a small cottage in their backyard, and they wouldn't be able to build a unit above their garage and make it into a separate dwelling unit from the house. This suggests that we would make ADUs a permitted use in the residential zoning district, so that means someone could establish it without a conditional use permit, without a public hearing, without coming to the Plan Commission and or the council. It would be a by right use. They would have to get building permits and approval from the zoning administrator. So instead of coming through that process, we want to pay particular attention to the standards that are built in. And there's a lot of variety of ways that you could address this. For example, the way that it's written right now has an 800 square foot maximum. I'm noticing in the memo that it says 8,000. That is not correct. The code is correctly written. Ignore the memo. 800 square feet in size. Oregon's looking at it now, and they want to have a 1,200 square feet. They're being a little bit more flexible. I think Watertown's looking at 1,000. So I started with 800 here. If you want to be more flexible, you could make that a little bit bigger. Another example, a detached structure. I have it needing to meet accessory structure setbacks. So in someone's backyard, that would be like a 3-foot rear lot line, probably, and a 3-foot side yard lot line, and you could be back there. Some communities require a detached structure to comply with principal setbacks. So it'd have to be 25 feet back, and in that case, it would just be really close to your house. The principal structure, that would probably, in all reality, eliminate the possibility to have a detached structure in most situations. But if you're particularly concerned about proximity to neighbors, that would be one way to do it. We also do require in the draft code that one of the 2 units be owner occupied. The APA, American Planning Association, would say, don't include that rule, be more flexible, but a lot of communities still prefer that at least one of the units be owner occupied. So that's the way that it's drafted right now.
Do we have any current situations, or has not been permitted
I
up
don't
to this
know.
point?
It's not allowed. I think we have one situation, I don't know, I think it may have changed in last year with ownership change, but the Kurth Mansion, there's a smaller dwelling on the side and in the back and behind the mansion, and that was used as a living quarters in addition to the mansion itself. So that would be something that was going on for years, and was a non-conforming use in my mind. But that's the only one that, well, they're not legally permitted. Someone can't come in and get a permit for that right now.
It seems to me that putting in a restriction that says it has to be, family member or, that type of thing, once the thing is built, it exists. And at some point, the family member or the owner of the house is going to pass away, and you will be left with an apartment. So I think you have to look at this and just say you're putting a rental house attached to, or, you're making duplexes, one way or another, is what it allows. And I'm not saying that's an awful or a good or terrible thing, but I think you just have to go into it.
It's just a fact.
It's just a fact.
Changing the structure.
Moving on to number 8, there are a few things built into this, but it's all about accessory land uses. So there are 4 listed on the screen, and my intent with this was not to get into every single detail of these, but just think more holistically about how to approach each of these, primarily from an administering them perspective. So let's see where to start. So I'm just going to jump down to chickens because you already allow chickens. They're in your code. They're in Chapter 14, Section 14-19. And my intent would be not to open or rewrite your rules for chickens because you already have them. So I would just make sure that the zoning code references that other part of your municipal code. I will note a license is required for chickens, but that is approved by staff. Okay, now I'm going to go to beekeeping, I guess the other sort of animal-related one. Accessory beekeeping is not in your code right now. So this would be a new land use. I would say 10, 15 years ago when this was kind of a newer thing for a lot of communities, there was a lot of concern about killer bees, and I'm not using that to like downplay anyone's concerns. There are people with real allergies and things like that. But the code standards in here are based on beekeeping standards. I'm not a beekeeping expert, but there are things in here about a flyway barrier or an appropriate setback that have been vetted now. And I have not heard of a lot of instances where the zoning allowance for bees has resulted in big problems. So that's what's listed in here as a new land use. Feel free to jump in if you want. Home occupations. This is, yeah.
Hold on 1 second. On the bees. So, the question on here, it sounds like you have something in there that aligns with what is like industry standard now, but the question here is, do you want to allow the use as described? So if we do, then we hit, I think I'm answering my own question, never mind.
Well, I do have that second bullet point on there. Like, if you require a license for chickens, do you want to require a license for bees so that they have to come to the counter and make sure that they're complying with those rules, and then it's a staff administration thing? So, some head nods.
Can I ask what the issuance of a license really achieves?
It's, the components a little bit are, there's some like site planning, so related things, and some of those regulations on, proximity to property line, like with the chickens. I don't know if, I can't remember what those rules are, but some of them are, I think there's a setback in there, the number of chickens, because at some point you get, or no roosters are allowed, so it's addressing the nuisance type thing.
So it's more like a site plan.
It's putting eyes on it.
Like like a rooster is not a site plan thing.
Well,
banning
but
roosters.
it's like a site plan in the sense that you're making sure the person who's doing this
Yeah.
understands the rules. Just like on a site plan, that's to make sure that the person building whatever knows what the setbacks are and are complying by them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then it allows us, if there's, if so, if we have a license, we know the location of a permitted use, you can, helps with enforcement because you know where it is and you can count the number of chickens if, potentially if you can see
If
them.
they're not running around, that makes it harder.
Some of them are, some of them are running around. We have that issue in the city.
2-story, 3-story.
Let's not get into the chicken conversation.
We did have that issue the last couple months.
Okay, home occupations, this is a little bit different approach here, so I think your Yeah, I'll come back to that one. No problem, I'm jumping around, but your existing code has these as a conditional use. I'd say that's way more strict than any code that I've dealt with. So a home occupation is like, I want to have a sewing business and I'm going to do some alterations, and you can't notice from the street that I'm running a business there. Or personal finance or something like where there's just not a lot of traffic or customers or deliveries, things like that. So that's what a home occupation is. So most codes will allow that as a permitted use. I would definitely go in that direction anyway here because of the issues with a conditional use. It's performative. You pretty much have to approve it in most cases anyway. So don't go through the whole rigmarole of a public hearing and coming to Plan Commission to get a CUP. So that's the biggest change, is it's made a permitted use. But I think the other big difference is that there are a lot more details in there that help to clarify what this use can be. And those are meant to be protective, so that you don't have someone doing something that's a nuisance to their neighbors. There's a question, do you want a permit or a license? At a certain point, these become burdensome, and there's just a lot of licenses and permits to do. I would say no.
I would concur with Sonia on that this is a better route to go.
Short-term rentals. Don't remember what your existing code does, but state law changed recently, and all of, they're tying the city's hands about what you can do. The state is saying if you have a residential dwelling unit, you must allow it to be used as a short-term rental. You don't really have a choice. So that's why this shows up as a P for permitted use in all of the zoning districts. But you can regulate certain things. And so if you go to this section of the draft code, you'll see those listed there. And it has things like parking. You have to provide parking for the guests, or you can't have signage. Neighborhood impacts, I think there's something in there about no outdoor activity after 10 p.m. or something along those lines. So that's built in there. Again, question of license, you don't have to. All of these are supposed to get a state license, I think through DATCAP. So you don't have to double down on that, but if you do, then it gives you a way to make sure that you know who they are. And I don't think you need a local license either to ensure that you're getting the room tax dollars, because I think through DATCAP, they're requiring that as well. I could be wrong there, but if you get the local license, that's just another way to say, okay, you have to pay room tax, and the city would collect that from the lodger, from the lodging unit.
And previously, we've done this via conditional use permit. Going back for, I don't know when the last one went through, but it was conditional use permit. For instance, the governor's mansion is a short-term rental. That's the one I know, but there's more than that in the city.
So really, this version complies with state law, but if you get into the details there and you want to change something or make it more flexible or more restrictive, we could look at that. And then license or not, I think the way drafted, I would say no license unless you tell me otherwise. Industrial building height. I wanted to point this out because seeing the number of 130 feet might be a little bit shocking. So standard industrial building height, I believe, is 60 feet as drafted in the code. But we're hearing examples where industrial uses need a taller building height than that. And if you look into it a little bit, that might be from large equipment manufacturing. One that I saw an example of was like solar and wind equipment, wind turbine. You're probably not going to have a high chance of that very specific industry coming, or maybe another one with very large equipment manufacturing, but there are probably other examples. Or
Dog food factory has some
tall equipment. Okay.
Currently, we have exceptions to the height, industrial height, and in that exception, it talks about elevators and there's a whole list of
Yeah.
exceptions. So I know one thing, I know there's a couple of businesses in the city that potential expansion in Columbus, they're looking at that because of how we're dealing with height in the industrial zone. So including Fromm and others, so we just need to make sure we're not restricting that further.
Okay.
You can probably do it in different ways. But as long as we just think of like Fromm's grain elevators and things like that.
Yep.
And not restrict it.
We exempt certain height things automatically, like a church spire or a grain elevator or a chimney. Those are like kind of automatic allowances. This would be for the main portion of a principal building. You can go up to 130 feet, but for the portion that exceeds 60, that needs to be set back 75% of its height from the property line. So that 100, if they need something that goes up to 130 feet, that part of the building just needs to be set back pretty far from the property line. So that's a way to get it maybe a little bit less of an impact.
Not such a focal point.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a visual thing, so it's not imposing.
yeah.
How common is that approach in other communities?
I've seen it as recommended best practices. I haven't personally dealt with one. The other example is technology, so indoor cranes to move equipment around, maybe like automation and technology and manufacturing. And I think Watertown has some businesses like that, or like an Amazon distribution center to move a lot of things around. They need a crane inside there. This is actually a photo of a crane, but it doesn't look super tall in this particular image. So, I mean, there are a lot of different examples that could come up.
And I guess just my thought there is, you know, it's always, we've talked about having flexible code and balancing the nuisance stuff, and this is one of those things that it restricts some things, but, you know, does it end up restricting us too much? It may be right, but I'm just saying that's something we need to continue to think about.
Well, and industrial isn't typically right up against residential. There's usually some other buffers, so I'm not as concerned about height of industrial properties like that.
We have no airports.
And jumping back to a residential issue here. I don't think your existing code allows this, but you certainly have older style homes with front porches that come closer to the street. So this is an allowance. Let's say if your SF1 zoning district has a setback of 20 feet for the house, this would say your porch can come closer as much as to 10 feet from the property line. And this comes out of principles of neighborhood design, like kind of that new urbanism, which is basically going back to traditional single family. But it allows you to come out on your porch. Maybe you want a porch that's actually usable, 10 feet in depth. You can put furniture on it, not a 5-foot thing that you can't actually hang out on. And then you can sit on your porch and talk with your neighbors, and the concept of eyes on the street and things like that. So it's allowing this to come forward, but requiring that the porch itself be unenclosed, non-heated, non-habitable space. These can be a big headache for zoning administrators, because someone goes and builds a porch and then they come in and they're like, can I screen this in? Does glass count? And then you have to make that
Yes.
interpretation. So we just want to make sure that Mike would be comfortable with the definition of how that's restricted. Yeah. Just wanted to point that out as, make sure something that you're comfortable with. Okay.
I see this, stuff like this, probably happening a lot in our older parts of the city. And you know what, even potentially some newer places, because I know in some of the lots, we've had people looking to add on, and our current setbacks in that one district is 35 feet, and that has been a barrier to additions. And I don't know if in some of those neighborhoods, they put a porch on the front, but it's that whole idea of flexibility and those kinds of things. And
Well, if for
That's
allowing some smaller lots, it's a nice way to have a little more living space on a
Yes.
smaller lot.
Okay, so we've gone from
questions of like structurally how the code is set up with the zoning districts, those residential mix, the business park, the downtown. I've talked in more detail about the overlays with Mike, and we're gonna get that figured out. And then we got into a lot of detail on specific things. But now that we went through that, if you go back to the code and you notice another land use that you have a question about, feel free to reach out. I think good feedback, and I know the general direction that you want to go on all of these as of tonight. So I'll get those changes reflected, and then we're going to move into testing this on a zoning map and starting to work on some of the part 2 content. Like parking standards might be something that you see sooner than later. Any other questions?
Do you want our little packet?
If you have things you'd like me to look at, yep, I can take it. Otherwise, I think I got what was verbally stated.
I mean, I'll give it to you, but.
Okay.
Everything that you're doing.
All right.
So this said, consider and take action regarding draft, I guess.
You don't have to.
I don't know that we have any motions to make. I
No.
mean, appreciate comments, and then this is ours to love and cherish and write in, right? So,
Do you guys want binders? For the
I don't. This will give me a use for the 78 I have at home.
Okay. Solution guy.
He's a solution guy.
All right. I guess, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Last item on the agenda here is consider future agenda items. I don't know if any of us have anything boiling other than this. What's the likely time frame for our next discussion? Not next month, maybe the month after?
I think that's the part of the purpose of bringing you some other things like the zoning map and the parking table separately, so that we don't have to wait as long to get all of part 2, because there's quite a lot of detail in part 2. So I'll talk to you about timing, but we can get, if not the next one, then for sure the one after that.
Sure.
For a couple of things.
Okay.
We will be having a public hearing on a expansion of a business over on Commercial Drive. So we'll have that for Marquardt RV. So we'll have that public hearing at the next meeting.
Okay. Anything else that we'd like Mike to put in the hopper? Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.